Hi, I'm Brooks Robertson, and this is Coffee Talk.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department at Berklee College of Music, and welcome to another Coffee Talk. Today I have my Berklee Guitar Department mug, so I'm ready to go. And I'm here with Cheryl Bailey, our assistant chair. Coffee cheers, Cheryl.
I have water today, but I roasted some Robusta and I drank it this
All right.
morning. And that has twice the caffeine, so I feel pretty good.
Cheryl, are you going to be bringing that somehow into the?
I could smuggle some in.
We might need that as the semester progresses. I'm just saying, you know. Um, Ian Steed, our senior coordinator, is here as usual.
Folks, hey all.
Hey, Ian. And our guest today is Brooks Robertson, our brand new faculty member, our newest member of the faculty, who is an alum of the guitar department. And we're just really excited that you're here. Like, welcome, Brooks.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me to be on Coffee Talk. I've been excited. I couldn't sleep at all last night because I was thinking about it so much, but I try to not be too nervous at this point. But the coffee doesn't really help the nerves, actually, believe it or not.
It's a good point. It's a good point. What are you drinking today? Are you did you make coffee in the office this morning?
I did. I just made a fresh cup of coffee in the guitar department. I got it right here. And I got a mug. My first week, I got a mug over at Trident Booksellers because I figured that would be a good thing to have here, to keep around. So yeah, I'm getting very caffeinated at this point.
It's a nice mug. So yeah, we expanded everyone when we came back. We always had a nice coffee setup, but now we've got two different options. We have the Nespresso and we have the Keurig. So what do you go for, Brooks? Do you go for strength or volume when you're in the office?
Both. Well, I don't know. I fill up this mug. I've just been drinking black coffee as of recently. And yeah, it seems to do the trick. But I actually haven't tried out the espresso machine yet. I need to do that at some point.
Yeah, you need to do that. That sounds great. So Brooks, you have really been on our faculty now for just weeks.
Yeah. Yep.
And so
It's been
this is
incredible so
kind of
far.
interesting because usually we ask people about their first days at Berklee. So, um, can you talk about your memories of your first days as a student here? And then can you also kind of talk about how it feels now to be in the beginning of your time as a teacher?
Right. Absolutely. Well, I remember the first time that I ever came to Berklee was before I was a student or knew that I was going to be a student. And I came to say hi to Guy Van Duser because I've known Guy since I was 12 years old. I met him at the Chet Atkins Appreciation Society convention in Nashville when I was 12. And my teacher, Buster B. Jones, introduced me to Guy. And so I kind of got to know Guy over the years. And I was visiting Boston for the first time, probably over 10 years ago. And as I said, at that time, I had no idea I would actually have the opportunity to be a Berklee student. But I came and visited Guy, and I actually came into this exact room and got to say hi to him. And he was so nice. He even let me hang out for a bit and talk to him and play a little bit. And then it wasn't until several years later that I had the opportunity to come to Berklee as a student. And so I'm trying to remember my first day. I lived in the 98 Hemingway dorms my first semester, and I slept like on the top bunk bed. There were two other guys I shared the room with who were really great guys. And I'm trying to remember my first day. I really can't remember the first day exactly, but I felt like it was a real whirlwind from the time that I started all the way until I finished, like 7 semesters later. It was a little bit of a blur because it was very busy, and I took the maximum. Well, I don't know if it was the maximum, but I did about 16 credits every semester. And so I felt very busy, and it just went by so fast, but I really loved my whole experience at Berklee. Everything from harmony classes to ear training of course, being in the guitar department and doing ensembles and lessons. So I loved my experience at Berklee as a student. I remember when I graduated, I felt like, wow, I have a lifetime worth of material now to go through and to really dig into. And it will probably always feel like that. And now, for the last little bit over a month, being an assistant professor here, it's been incredible. It's been, it's hard to describe, like just 3 or 4 years after graduating, having the opportunity to come back and teach here has been amazing. I definitely feel like all those experiences of being a guitar student are still pretty fresh for me. So I remember sort of what it was like to be in different ensembles, prepare for those, or take different guitar lessons with different instructors and prepare for example, proficiency. All that's pretty fresh still, which has been helping me, I think, to just sort of put myself in the student's shoes a bit. And yeah, overall, it's been wonderful.
So Brooks, a couple questions came to mind as you were talking, and I think that we could go in a lot of different directions with a lot of things. But one thing I was thinking about first was that when you came to Berklee as a student, you had a career that was a long career, because you really started as a professional at a very young age. If you were a kid, like not
I
just
was a
like,
kid.
oh, you're a kid, like, oh, you're a young adult. No, you were actually a kid when you started
Yeah.
your professional career. And then when I first came into contact with your playing and stuff, it was because I know you had played with a lot of our faculty and our colleagues when you were really young, but you
Mhm.
did a competition that Lee Ritenour puts out called the Six String Theory
Right.
competition. For a long time, I was a judge, and so was Larry Bayonne. And one of the prizes that people can choose from the competition, if you win, is to come to Berklee. And so
Mhm.
you came to Berklee as a very seasoned professional. And so I found it really interesting and fun when you came, because I felt like you're in the position that a lot of faculty are in, where
Mhm.
it's like your time at Berklee, whatever it is a continuation. It's like a lifelong learning, right? But
Absolutely.
because you came to this with the perspective of having had one phase of your professional career at an incredibly high level, I wonder, what did you feel like, I mean, from your perspective, how did having your career sort of on the front end in one part of it influence the way that you were a student? Like,
Mm.
you know what I'm saying? Because like you already kind of had been on stage, and you'd been on records, and you'd been on tour, and you'd done all those things. And so now you're coming, and I remember one of our first conversations, you had a list of things that you felt were gaps. And you're like, okay, I want to be in this group because I love Jerry Reed's music and Chet Atkins' music, but like I want to learn to read, and I want to learn to improvise, and I want to learn
Right.
this about my technique. Like, I felt like you had a list of like, okay, here's what's propelled me so far, but here are the things that are gaps. And I think that maybe your perspective, if you would talk about it for a while, would be helpful to people who are trying to figure out how to manage their own education, because you already kind of knew what you needed out there.
Mhm. Right. Absolutely. And when I
What do you think?
when I first started as a freshman at Berklee, I was 26 years old, which is older than most people when they graduate. I would say probably on average. And I had been playing and doing a lot of things, since I was a kid. And so for me, I felt like it was a real advantage, just personally, not that it was an advantage over other people, but just for myself. It was nice that I had a lot of time before coming to Berklee to think about, like, okay, what do I really want to work on, and what are my strengths and weaknesses, and how can I, coming to Berklee, I feel like you could learn anything you want with just about any instrument, or with music. And so that can be kind of overwhelming. So for me, I just tried to prepare ahead of time a little bit of like, what are the things I know I want to learn about, like you said, Kim, those different gaps that I kind of knew I had. But then also just identifying like, what are the things that uh, I can kind of bring to the table that I'm good at, that are my strengths, because obviously don't want to forget about those, just want to build on top of those. So for me, like I would say I was a little more mature than some of the students just because of my age and also having experience and hanging around also a lot of musicians who are older than me and a lot better than me. Um, I just sort of I came into it just and I gave it 100% every day. Like no matter the class, even if it was a liberal arts class about art theft at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, I was like 100% into it, just as much, as any other class. So I tried to just give it 100%. I took notes like a madman in every class. Like at home, I have huge stacks of I wrote to write down everything any teacher wrote on the board. If they like wrote an example of something, even if I didn't quite get it or it didn't click or something, I would just write it down. And so I have it. And because I was always thinking to myself, like, this is, my experience as a student here is going to come to an end at some point. And so I want to just be able to take this stuff with me and continue to study it. So I think it helped to just be focused on what I want to work on, go to every class with an open mind and just give it 100%. And then, yeah, I was just focused on school the whole time, really. I mean, I was able to still do some gigs, and I was lucky to do some concerts for the school in different capacities. And so I was able to keep playing a bit, but really I just focused and dove in 100% on, everything with being a Berklee student. And I think I got I got a lot out of it by doing that. Some of the things at this point, I've probably forgotten a lot of things, but like I said, I feel like I've got a great catalog of stuff. I can go back, my own notes, and there's so many resources too to go back and keep learning. But I've always enjoyed being a student and just learning new things, and to some degree enjoy practicing and that kind of thing, actually a lot. So I just found the whole experience was really fun, and it was never a dull moment. And then, as I was sort of saying earlier, by the time I finished, it felt like it went by in a blink of an eye.
Brooks, can you think of specific lessons that you learned at Berklee that reinforced something that you had learned by being out in the professional community or being out on the road?
Yeah, I'm probably not thinking off the top of my head of many of them. Specific experiences I had at Berklee. Well, I mean, some of the performance type stuff, like when I would get a chance to do some performing with the Chet Atkins Jerry Reed Ensemble, or any kind of performance. I got a few recitals at the school. I already kind of knew, like, okay, you need to be there ahead of time. You need to be there to do a sound check. You need to make sure you have extra strings, got a tuner, have a cable with you. Things like that. That actually went a long way, because some of that, I won't name any names, but I had classmates who would show up to the gig and does anybody have a cable? And it's like, we're going on in 5 minutes, come on. And so that kind of stuff was reinforced. But of course, the professors I had were all giving tips about the stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm used to doing that or something. Even simple things like taping my charts together. And when I was in the Jerry Reed Chet Atkins Ensemble, Rick Peckham would always tell us, tape your charts together, and I had done that a little bit before when I was doing some stuff with my friend John Standifer, who's in Vancouver, Washington. That's where I first got into doing that. And I know it probably seems simple for some people watching. And I saw all of you kind of smile and shake your head, that because then I don't lose a page or something. I can practice it in order. I can do so. Yeah, there were a lot of things that kind of I had been exposed to before, just from playing gigs and that kind of thing, that were reinforced at Berklee and helped me. Even stuff like when I was younger and I would do gigs, sometimes I would, not be really prepared in terms of the gear I had or getting to the gig ahead of time. I'm sure everybody's been there, you're running late and then something happens on the way to the gig and you're so stressed out. And so that's something that really stresses me out, is that if I want to be prepared and get there early and that kind of thing. So those experiences from doing gigs and that kind of thing as a young adult, I kind of just brought that to like my whole approach at Berklee, and make sure I'm at, any class on time and kind of prepared, and that kind of thing. There's more I'm forgetting about too.
But on the other side of that, I think some people would be listening to this if they know who you are, and they would say like, well, why did that guy even go to college? Like, he had a career. I mean, he has a career. He
Mhm.
could have a career for the rest of his life. What can you put your finger on maybe one or two things, or maybe there's a bigger way of framing it for you? How does it feel now after you've had a college experience where maybe you did get into some things deeper that were a little outside of your main style? Like, how does that affect your playing moving forward and the way you are professionally?
So I felt like there were so many things with being a student at Berklee that I normally would have probably never done if I hadn't gone to Berklee or a music college. Like, for example, learning to read. Like, I knew how to the basics of like figuring out the note names on the staff. I sort of knew some basic rhythms, but I never really felt like I knew how to just even read basic stuff. And so doing classes here like ear training, I felt like I learned so much. And MAT is where I started out in my harmony classes. Just learning, like reinforcing a lot of those basics, because I knew some stuff, but I had so many gaps. And so those type of classes I actually got a lot out of doing ear training. I really loved all the harmony classes so much. I just really have a passion for chords and harmony and just cool sounding progressions. And so I felt like some of the harmony classes, a little bit of it was a review, tiny bit, but then there's so much more that was added in that I never would have dreamed of really understanding. And some of the things, like a lot of us, like I had done a lot of the stuff. Maybe I had played this certain type of chord or progression, but I never really knew how it worked, how I could expand it, how could I morph that, how could I tweak it, do it in a different key or apply it somewhere else. And then, I mean, so there's just like dozens of classes that I felt that way about here. Ear training, harmony, doing the private guitar instruction lessons. Like, one thing, when I took lessons here, I was really lucky to study with, I studied with Lyle Brewer my first semester. I also studied with John Wheatley and Rick Peckham and Jack Pisanelli. And I felt they all gave me so much different stuff that I probably never would have normally studied. And it was a real stretch for me. And a lot of it comes down to, I kind of need a lifetime to just practice what one of them has given me, but I just learned so many new things, and it definitely it's absolutely affected how I approach playing and writing tunes. And I feel like I've always sort of written tunes, and most of the time that used to just come from noodling around, which it still does. That's how I write a lot of tunes, is by noodling a little bit and finding an idea and then expanding on that. And I felt like after I left from Berklee and things started to click more, I had all these resources to really expand on knowing how to come up with ideas that I never really even thought about before. So those are a few of the ways that it's kind of affected me after I've graduated, and I still feel like I've got to practice a lot more. I'm sure we all feel like that.
I think we all do. And I just have a couple more things to lay the foundation here, and then I can tell Cheryl's got a lot on her mind, so I'm going to throw it over there. But a lot of students have this experience that you're having where you feel like at a certain point you're information collecting, right? Because you have this opportunity in a very short amount of time to take a lot of classes. So how do you manage your collection of information? You said, like, okay, there's some things that just have stacks and stacks of notebooks. How do you manage that as you're moving forward in your career and you're teaching? How are you going through that stack of things that you knew that, okay, this is for the future?
I need a better system, that's for sure. Like, I really don't have a perfect system by any means. The things that that I go back a lot and have revisited, definitely a lot of my harmony classes, going back and, checking in on things. I mean, some things are ingrained where I'll never forget. Some things that are just, certain harmony topics about different types of chords. Like I just sort of feel like I have those rock solid. But then some things I'm thinking sometimes, what was it, that really cool move you could use in this tune? And then I'll go back and check things out. So I do have them organized pretty well. And after I graduated, I went through like all my notes I had, and I just organized them into little folders or like a binder with each different subject, and just wrote, okay, spring 2017 harmony 3. And then I just put everything that they gave me, because they give out a lot of material too. And I just kept all of that. And so I've got a good library of stuff at home that I revisit, but I don't have a great system about how to go through it. And I have a problem with doing a little bit over here and then a little bit over here. So that's something I got to work on a bit myself. But it's funny because I feel like there's always been something I can look back on when I'm curious about something, that I can check in on and say, oh yeah, right, we did cover this. So that's a personal thing with like practicing and being more organized. I got to work on too.
I
better not be saying all this.
I know. I think this is great. It's very honest. This is why people watch the show, right, and listen to it. But I think one of the cool things, like just as you're talking about these topics so far, is it just comes across that you're a very happy person. You really love playing the guitar and learning it. And I mean, from what I understand from people who knew you for a long time, you always kind of had that quality, right? As a kid, like you were really curious and very positive, and then you worked really, really hard, and you pulled a bunch of different things together, and you were like always willing to learn new things. And like now as a much older adult, you obviously have retained that. And I think sometimes what people don't understand that's so great about that is that if you look at that from a standpoint of professional development, like, why wouldn't people hire you? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, you're going to be fun to work with. You're going to go with the flow. You're going to bring some cool ideas. You're going to work really hard on parts that might be weird. You're going to always be prepared for the gig. You're going to show up on time with your cable. You know what I mean? If something strange happens, you're probably going to be cool. Like, it just feels like, and have you ever reflected on that, like that quality that you fostered or maybe learned from older players or the adults in your life ended up being like a really good, like, kind of career asset in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I've thought about it a little bit. It probably comes from my mom first and foremost. Like, she is the most bubbly, bright, positive person, and I just kind of get that from her. She's always smiling, but like everybody, there's times where you don't want to mess with me because I'm in such a bad mood or something, right? But for the most part, I feel like I have a good attitude and try to remain positive on stuff. I mean, of course, everybody gets things that get them down or get you frustrated. But I guess the people that I was always hanging around when I was younger, playing a lot, like my teacher, Buster B. Jones, some of his friends, like Noki Edwards, and Tom Bresh and Bob Saxton, a lot of these older, like fingerstyle players, I always found that they were really willing to share anything with younger players, and they weren't trying to keep any secrets for themselves. Like, they just they'd be happy to show you something or show you how to play something. And so that also I really just picked up from them. And I got into doing my first little bit of teaching with my teacher, Buster B. Jones. Like, he would go out and do different festivals and things, and he would give like a clinic or something, and I would be his assistant as like a teenager. He'd say, all right, we're going to work on this like right hand technique, and here, he'd call me B. He's like, B, show him how that sounds, and I would just play it. And then he's like, okay, good, stop. And then he'd keep talking, and he'd say, okay, show him how to do this. And so that's kind of where I got into my first experience of teaching. And then I just realized, like, I really love this. It's a lot of fun. It's challenging for sure. Like, it makes you have to learn more and keep yourself up with what you're doing. But I always just try to bring that approach. Like, I'm happy to just share anything I can that I've learned. And I mean, I feel like I only know the tip of the iceberg of a lot of things, but it's always exciting to share those things with other people. So yeah, it keeps me pretty happy.
Cheryl, what do you think? What are you thinking about right now with everything that Brooks laid out?
Yeah, wow, a lot of things. Well, I mean, I was really lucky to come up around older musicians and always had that feeling that people were really happy to share because they just want the music to share the music and keep it going, right? So I think that's a really amazing that you had that experience. And also, well, I was thinking, had my head around taking the notes, and I did that as well at Berklee because there was some point where I realized, that there's certain things about your development you can't rush. It's going to be ready when it's ready to do. When you're ready to do it, whatever that could be. So I realized, okay, if I take really good notes, that moment when I'll be ready, the information will be there for me. And I think that's so important. For instance, when I teach the harmonic considerations class, I took meticulous notes. And when I went to teach it, when they asked me to teach it, it was really amazing. I was really excited. And I went back to my notes, and then I realized that everything in that book, all my notes were things that I used every day, and that was a great feeling to go like, oh man, really having that archive. But then it was so easy to, well, the curriculum's already there. I wrote it 20 years ago, whatever, when I was a student, really, like just transcribing everything. So I think that's great. And I, always encouraging students to have that, also that extra sensory stimulus to look and write. I think that's a big part. Do you learn a lot that way? Or do you, I mean, besides you Berklee, like things that you do, are you this kind of person that writes things out, or do you take things in maybe more by rote, or a combination of
Probably for me, a combination. But I do tend to, for some reason, I just like writing things down by hand too. It may not be so like the most efficient. Like, I know I could probably do more things just on my computer or something, but I like writing things down by hand, especially when I was taking notes for classes. There'd be a combination of stuff in certain classes where you need to write something that's in notation, like they write something up a melody, and then you need to write the chords, and then you need to write some text. And so I always found that it was just really easy for me to do it, by hand. I tend to do that a lot. I like to just rewrite things out a lot by hand, basically.
That's really interesting. I think that the paper connection means a lot. A lot of people. Do you feel like it gets in your mind more when you write it out by hand?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you just reinforce it.
Yeah.
And I found, even well before I was a college student here at Berklee, like, I would go to guitar lessons. I was so lucky to have a lot of great teachers along the way. And I would go to lessons, and like 15 minutes into it, they would be giving me some really valuable, important information about something. And in that moment, it was totally clicking. I thought, like, I get this, And then like 45 minutes went by, I talked about a bunch of other stuff. And even by the time I went out to my car after the lesson to drive home, some of it had just slipped away. And I thought, because I didn't necessarily record a lot of stuff. I know some students do that, and like they'll record the audio or video. And so that's another reason I try to take a lot of notes, is because I found then I would go home, and maybe it was a couple days or a week before I actually decided to practice. I shouldn't be saying this, decided to practice what I was supposed to do for the lesson. And at that point, so much time had passed, it was really hard to remember. okay, what was that really important thing I was supposed to remember? And so that for me is like one of the big reasons I always wrote it down, because then I could just go back and check like, oh, there it is. Um, and so I've always taken that approach ever since.
Brooks, do you feel like there are new things that you're working on now? Like, what are you getting into now that makes you really curious that you're kind of inspired to do that kind of work with?
Mm. Well, a lot of things. I mean, I'm trying to work on more original tunes. That's something I've been working on, and that goes all over in several different directions. Um, I feel like there's just so much that I still want to learn about chords and scales and harmony and improvisation and writing and arranging. And sometimes it feels like, some days I feel like, oh, I know a lot. And some days I feel like, oh my gosh, what am I even doing? Do I even know any of this? And I mean, it's just from day to day, because there's so much in any field. Like it's one of those things, kind of the more you find out about, it's just the picture gets bigger and bigger. But these days, yeah, I mean, I've also been doing a lot of teaching at home, online, through like Zoom lessons and through a TrueFire platform. So I've been probably doing more teaching than I have been playing and practicing, and that's like I'm trying to still figure out how to balance that. And so yeah, these days the things I'm working on the most are just some new tunes I'm writing that are, every single one of them I seem to get to a roadblock, and then I leave it for a while, come back to it. So I'm really trying to just get more original tunes of mine going. And that's just come from, they're all built upon other great tunes that I learned from my teacher Buster or Chet Atkins or Jerry Reed. They're really all influenced by those great players that I really have spent a lot of time just emulating all these people I really look up to, and Tommy Emmanuel. So now it's exciting because I kind of am able to build upon all that, but do my own thing more and more. I don't know where it's going though.
That's exciting. That's really
Yeah.
cool. That's really cool. I think also that's good for young players to hear that it's okay when you don't know where things are going. That's part of the
Mm-hmm.
adventure of this, and maybe sometimes you are uncomfortable when you're learning new things, and it's not like you hit a certain level and then you're never uncomfortable again. It's like you just
Right.
kind of learn how to be comfortable with that discomfort of learning, but the good parts too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ian, I'm gonna throw it over to you. And there's a question you always ask, and you can ask it, but and if you have other things on your mind, just keep going.
Yeah, well, well, first of all, I really identified with some of the stuff you were saying, like as coming as an older student, and
Mm-hmm.
like about what you got out of it, right? Because the question Kim asked was like, if you have all this experience, et cetera, like, why even come here, And I think you like hit the nail on the head. You were like, talked about the harmony and the ear training stuff, and it's like this stuff was developed for people with experience to think
Mm-hmm.
about it in a different way, right? Like, and that's the cool thing about Berklee is like, um this, like the core music that you have to take, like the harmony that you study, the ear training is not the same as it is in a conservatory. It's not made for musicians who are just playing Brahms. Brahms is awesome, and you have to study that too, but like it's meant for musicians like that like have experience, and to come back like to your writing that you were talking about, and like it's interesting, like we have these moments where you go through a period where you're trying to write original stuff and it's hard to come up with things, but like the cool thing is like a lot of these things that you learn are like this extensive just wealth of like ideas and seeds to keep going on it, right? And like you
Right.
pull apart these tunes and it's like, well, it looked like Steve Swallow did this on this tune or whatever, and that's like such an invaluable thing, right? But yeah, sorry, I don't mean to rant here, but
No.
like there's a question that we ask everybody on this podcast, which is interesting now that you're like, probably you talked about your memory of being a guitar student here is so fresh, and you're the most recent person probably that we've even talked to that's like an alum. And it's funny that you're teaching now, but the question is like, what's something that students should be asking or thinking about as a student that they might not think to ask, right? The question that's sort of in their blind spot.
Ooh, gosh, that's a really good question. I might have to think about that for a moment, I'm not trying to dodge the question, I promise. But I am thinking too that one thing just along the same lines is that I think if people who are students here, like when they have a question, I know that I'm sure we've all been here, like we're in a class and the teacher's doing something and then something doesn't really click and we sort of want to raise our hand, but then we look around, there's other like classmates who are like, no, I should know this, or like people are going to think that I don't know I shouldn't be in this class with me. So I think that if you have a question in a class or something that's not making sense, like just raise your hand and ask about it, even if you're not quite sure, because other people have the same question for sure. And you want to make sure that clicks, and the teacher is 100% happy to go over it again with you, to show it to you. So I had, for a while, I think that actually when I came in as a student, I was pretty much just, if I had a question, no matter how silly I felt like it was, or simple or advanced, I would just ask it. And it always helped me out. And then other people probably were wondering the same thing. So I know that doesn't answer the question about what they should be thinking about, but I would say as a piece of advice for any Berklee student, like if you have questions, this is the time and the place to ask them. Do you know what I mean? Unless you want to be emailing like 5 years, 6 years later, your harmony teacher or your guitar teacher to tell you about what that thing was, like just go for it and ask questions. And so that I felt like I got a lot out of just going for it and just saying like, hey, I don't understand this. Can you help me? And then it really made a big difference.
Brooks, that's actually that's the best advice right there. I mean, I always say those that ask the most questions get the most answers. So, right. You come there, and that you really, for you to say that, I think is really important for the students to hear, because they do have this thing of they're scared to ask it, but probably, 3 other people have the same question. But I also feel that when the student asks a question, you also help the teacher teach you, because they don't know what you don't know, and then that can open that doorway to maybe it opens another discussion, or when you see, there are several people that have the same question, maybe we need to just step back from what we're working on here and address that. And I think that's right. Actually the magic that happens in a classroom when those students ask those questions. So I'm really glad that that was your answer, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's great. And I think the other thing that relates to what you just said and what Cheryl said is you went through, and you're talking about your experience as a student, and you talked about giving 100% when you're in harmony and when you were in ear training and when you're in liberal arts. And so many times I think when students come to school and they're overwhelmed by all the things that you have to learn when you're there, people are like, why am I in this? Like, why am I in harmony 4? Like, what am I doing in there? Or why am I doing solfege in ear training? And, or, MAT, it's like just the basics or whatever. But you didn't have that experience. You found all kinds of excitement and value in those things that related directly to your career, and the same with liberal arts. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about that with each of those topics, like with harmony, ear training, and liberal arts. Like, what did you take that you can think about that really helped you?
Yeah, I sort of feel like everything, I got something out of everything. I know that's an easy way to say it, but when I was a student here, I did professional music. I remember like the months and months leading up to coming to Berklee, and I was on the Berklee webpage, all like scouring it all the time, trying to figure out like, okay, what are my options? Like, what are the majors do I want to do? And I I was torn between doing something like songwriting or composition, or maybe film scoring, or maybe performance. And I just felt like, gosh, there's several of these that sound interesting to me. And so I don't remember, it was maybe my first semester or something, I sort of heard about pro music, where you could maybe take several of those topics and like delve into them, like partially in different fields. So I just immediately knew, okay, that's going to work for me, because I want to do a little bit of this, but I also want to do, so for example, I wanted to do some CWP, writing production. I also wanted to do some music business classes and some performance. And so just my first semester, I said, okay, I think that's what I want to do. And I went and I talked to Sean Hagen, who was the chair of pro music at that point, and just said, okay, like sign me up. I know this is the path I want to be on. And so that was helpful, because he kind of laid out for me, okay, here's how this works. And so I ended up studying some CWP classes, which I got some courses about not Finale, Pro Tools and Logic and that kind of thing. I had some I took several arranging classes, like arranging 1 and 2, and chord scales for arranging. And so did several things in that vein. And then I also did some music business classes, like intro to music business, like publishing and different licensing things. Within pro music, we had to do sort of artist entrepreneur type of classes and professional development things. And meanwhile, of course, like those were maybe more specific to the different topics I was trying to study. But meanwhile, of course, like Ian was saying, you have to do all the core classes. You get to do all the core classes. So the ear training, I mean, I felt like ear training, I learned a ton about reading notation and reading rhythms. And it was not comfortable at first for me to want to sing in front of my classmates, because I just felt like, but I was able to just get over that pretty quickly. And so I felt like every level of ear training, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I also did these 2 like harmonic ear training classes, where we did more about chord progressions and that kind of thing. Every one of those I got different things out of, and of course they all built upon each other. And there were things in ear training classes that would overlap with other things, like things I was doing in my guitar lessons, maybe things I was doing in harmony. So there's so much overlap in a good way. Everything's connected, and there's such a good system here. So yeah, ear training, I think it sounds funny to say it, but it really helped my ear a lot, and my reading rhythms and writing notation. Same thing with, I did MAT, where there was a lot of review, but there was a lot of things that I just didn't know about, basics that I just never really knew or never understood. And then of course I did like Harmony 1, or no, that is Harmony 1, Harmony 2, 3, 4, which I got so much out of all those classes. And again, those same things from Harmony were overlapping with ear training, or what I was doing in my ensemble, or what I was doing in my private lesson. Now I'm forgetting the other core classes that we have to do. I'm forgetting about some of them, but then like even though liberal arts, I was able to do things that were all music related, which was great. Maybe with the exception of like one art history class I took that was really fun still. But I was able to do some music acoustics classes for liberal arts, where I learned about acoustics and recording. And so to me, it all blends together. It all fits together, and there's a lot of overlap between the different core classes, and it's just laid out in such a great system. That's part of it too. Like you were saying, Kim, that some people might be wondering, like, what am I going to do with this? Well, you just sort of hang in there to those people, and like it's laid out in a very great structure in a way that makes sense. And at this point, I'm just rambling. Help me.
You're not rambling.
I lost my train of thought for a second there.
That's okay. I think that's what I wanted you to talk about a little bit, because I think it's really cool when you can see the connections between things, because
Hmm.
that really helps on the hard days, right? Like on the good days, everything just feels really interesting and really fun. But like when it gets to like this time in the semester, it's like week 6 or week 5, and it's like, oh my goodness, like I've bitten off all
Hmm.
of these courses, you know? I think it's important to know that there are a lot of connections. Maybe you don't see all the connection points right away at that moment, but all these things are helping. And I think it's great that you're, as you're saying, rambling, but I don't think anybody thinks that. Um, because what you're doing is you're making connections as you're talking, as a person who, like, you know, went out into the world first and then you came to school, and so you can see, you know, more directly. Like for some people it's like, will this pay off? And you can see, like, I know how this is going to pay off because I've already
Hmm.
been there, and if I had this, that could have been easier. So now moving forward, you have all the experience, right? So I think that's great. I mean, I'd say ramble away is what I'd say. um,
Careful.
Cheryl, what are you thinking about at this point in the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, um, for you to come or go back to school, you know, as your career is going on, I mean, that says so much about your love for studying, and also um, your passion for playing the guitar and learning and getting better all the time. Like it never ends. And just like the older musicians who really influenced you, right? I mean, maybe that's a part of it. Those folks are always like learning and sharing information all the time. It's really, it's a continuum. So thinking about where, what we were just saying about, oh, sometimes people go, why do I have to study this or that? And having faith, so much of playing music and being a musician professionally even is sometimes that act of faith of like, all right, you know I don't know what this is right now, and that's okay. I think that kind of came up earlier too, just to maybe even professionally, we're in those situations too. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but that's okay, you know,
Right.
because you're gonna approach it with that curiosity and also that integrity of, giving 100% all the time.
Hmm.
And that kind of leads you to your next place that you go. But studying those things like ear training and writing and reading, they really make a whole picture of a musician, you know. So
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of just about everything also that I learned from being a student. And I was also, while I was a student, I was also trying to observe what my teachers were doing, to see like what are the things I think that are, what are things I like that certain teachers do? What are things that I feel like, okay, maybe that's not what I want to do or something when I give a lesson. And everybody's different with how they do things, but I just felt like I learned a lot as a teacher, even, or like I learned a lot of skills that helped me a lot as a teacher from being a student here too. If that makes sense. I mean, in some things like reading and writing, nowadays I do for students I'm able to like, okay, I can write out a transcription of this or this song, as long as it's an easy one. Um, and those kind of skills like have helped me a lot, or just being able to kind of look at things from different perspectives to help describe it to different people. So I feel like that also is so huge for me. Is just learning a lot as a student, but then it was just building up more and more skills for me to use as a teacher too, which is exciting.
Mm. Yeah, the other thing that we've been talking about a lot lately is this idea that to have this recognition or this awareness that your life and music has a whole lot of different parts to it over time, right? And I think
Hmm.
it's really hard if you don't embrace that, because then at some point when a certain part of your life is changing, or like we're all going through these periods of change now, right? But like you could think, well, that's not who I am anymore, like if you're a teacher now, but you were on the road for a good part of your career, are you still yourself? You know, because like, oh, I'm not that person anymore that's up on stage all the time. And
Mhm.
you know, from where Cheryl and I sit, we watch a lot of people kind of go through this like self-examination a lot as their life changes. You know, like I was this in music and that became a lot of who I am, and now I do this other thing, and am I still myself? And I think what's really cool about what you did was you really, like Cheryl was saying, you had the courage to like come off of this whole part of your life, like your entire young adult life
Yeah.
was having this career and this identity as that I'm the guy who does this. And then you're able to come to school and say like, well, what if I'm the guy who does this, but also I want to do this other thing? And it's
Yeah.
not like those were the good old lost days and you don't know who you are anymore. Now it's like, wow, that was really cool. And you know what else is cool is what I'm doing now, which I find equally respectful and valued in my life. And now I'm
Mhm.
gonna like bring things together and move on. And I think everyone, if they're honest, has the experience where your life changes and maybe your talent is like, okay, it's professionally honored in this way, and then oh, there's this other professional avenue over here, but you have to retain who you are, right? And you seem like you've been able to do that. And I'm wondering if how that feels to you as you've done that in different parts of your life.
Yeah, I feel like I can relate to that. Um, just like you said, where I felt like at one phase, I felt like I was just performing all the time. And I sort of felt like that's what I would just be doing all the time. And then there's been other times where I was just hardly performing at all, especially as of recently with the pandemic and everything, and even before that, where I felt like I was doing much more, still playing a lot, but I was doing way more teaching, giving lessons and doing courses and stuff than I was performing. But I felt like it's still all connected, and it's just different facets um, of of music. Like that's one the things I love the most about being able to teach guitar and music is just to always be involved with doing something with music, which is to me so exciting. Some days, playing a lot and I'm talking about songs, but then other days it's something totally different. But it's all music related, and but but it is tough too. Like I have that feeling sometimes too, where I'm like, should I be trying to like book a bunch of gigs and go out on the road, or should I just not worry about that anymore and just record more from home or this? And so it's I don't really know the right answer, but it's all been really a fun part of the journey and process. And it's always exciting. It's always fun. I mean, there's times, yeah, that it's tough or frustrating. Um, but I've always enjoyed doing just like trying out different things.
That's great. That's great. Ian, as our coffee kind of comes to an end today, what are you thinking about? Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's neat that like, you know, that the students are studying with somebody who's it's like so fresh in their mind, and that also like the connection. I mean, it's so cool that like so many of the teachers here studied at Berklee and know the whole experience, and I did some studying at a community college, like I did some stuff as a kid, but like when I was at a community college, like I had a teacher who was like had perfect pitch and could play anything on the piano and was like a concert trombone player. And I just did not relate to this guy at all.
Mhm.
And it's just like it's a really cool thing to like hear you talk about all this stuff, and like it's such a relatable sort of arc of your your time here, your time after, and it's like a really cool thing that the students get to study with you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ian.
Hey, Cheryl, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. We're so lucky to have you. And because I know what you teach comes out of your experience and your joy of playing the guitar. And that's what we're about, right? So we're happy to have you on our team.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's great. I mean, I think you found your home. I'm so glad you did that competition.
I know, me too. Well,
I'm so glad
that
that they had the foresight to make studying the guitar a prize of a guitar competition. That's brilliant,
it
right?
is, and I think I don't want to like. I know we're wrapping it up, but it also just goes like I remember when I first heard about this Lee Ritenour six-string theory,
Hmm.
and that was around 2010, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, why don't you enter that?" I said, "No, like that'll never. No, I'm not going to enter that contest." And they said, "Well, what is it? What do you do?" And they said, "Well, the instructions say you apply in a certain style, country, classical, jazz, something like that, acoustic, and then you submit a few videos of yourself playing, and you pay a fee, like $30 or something to apply." And they said, "Just go for it, like try it." And so I listened to my friend and I did it. And then they were updating the results about how many different people had applied, and then I got a notification like, "Congratulations, you're in sort of the semifinals or something." And then I thought, wow, this is amazing. I don't know what's going to lead to this. And then I was selected as one of the finalists. There were maybe, I don't know, there were about 15 or something finalists in 2010, which was the first year they ever did the competition. And we all went to Santa Monica, California to perform live. Like the final round was live. And I remember that's where I met Larry Bayonne for the first time. He was one of the judges, and like Steve Lukather and Lee Ritenour, and all these people were the judges. And so we performed a few songs, each of us in the different categories. And that year I ended up being like the runner up. 2010, I was the second place. And the guy who got first place, his name was Sean Bobliel. He's an amazing Canadian classical guitarist. He was only 16, and he won that year. Like that was the grand prize, was to come to Berklee. And from my understanding, he came here and graduated and everything. And I was so thrilled to go that far. Like I had won the country category and I was runner up, and it was an incredible experience. I mean, I got to meet all these great people, to play for these people. I got a really nice Yamaha guitar, but I was like this close from going to Berklee, and it was kind of crushing. It crushed me a little bit. And I thought like for a year or so, I thought, oh, I was so close, to getting the chance to come to Berklee. But then the competition happened several years later, and if the rules were like, if you didn't win, you can apply again. And I just went for it. I said, I'm going to do it again. And that's when I got, I actually was never I was never the first place person of the competition, but in the later year I did it, which was like 2014, I think, they opened it up so that like, if you were in the top 10 finalists, you could apply to Berklee, and then there was like a selection process through Berklee. And so that's ultimately how it all happened for me to come here. And so it's just also, I feel like a story of, it sounds funny, but sort of resilience and just trying. And you never know, like you just have to put your best foot forward. You have to just try, even if you feel like it's a long shot or something. I think that you got to just go for it. And then the worst that's going to happen is that you're going to be in the same position you are when you started. But there's, a lot of times you'd be surprised about like what opportunities can happen. So for students watching, I think just there's no thing too large to go after, and just give it your all and try. And if it doesn't happen the first time, then that's the story of trying to get gigs or something too. If they decline you, like keep trying and keep working at it. And if you just keep working hard, like things are going to happen.
That is awesome advice, and it's a great thing for everybody to think about as you walk away. Maybe rewind that part and listen to it a few more times before you end your experience with the podcast. But thank you, Brooks. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to be on the guitar department faculty, but also on Coffee Talk. This is really fun.
Yeah, and thanks to you for being with us in every way. Thank you, Cheryl. Good to see you. Coffee cheers, and cheers to you, Ian. And we'll be with all of you on the next Coffee Talk.